Hi everybody, welcome to the first of many Wilbur's Blind Wine Tasting Adventures. This is going to be a series in conjunction with my friends at Port to Port, and we're going to be looking at the wonderful world of wine in a slightly different way. And I hope that through doing it in this different way, we're going to be able to uncover loads of myths and lots of misapprehensions, things that people don't really understand about wine. Wine can be ridiculously complicated, but in my opinion, and you might say, well, so what? But frankly, someone's got to have an opinion, and I always think I've got a pretty good opinion. He's very humble, this boy, Willie, isn't he? I think I know one or two things about wine, and in my opinion, wine is overcomplicated, and it shouldn't be. So, purposes of our tasting today is, number one, you should perhaps watch it, and in conjunction with a piece I've written for Port to Port about the nose. I feel that the nose is probably the most important weapon. I actually call it my best friend. If my wife was listening to this, she might take umbrage, but she knows what I mean. I am in love with my nose. Because I think via your nose you can just discover a massive world of excitement, and particularly when it comes to food and wine, because actually flavour in wine and flavour in food, a lot of it is dependent on your nose. And those of you who've had COVID or COVID-19 and have lost your sense of smell will more than anybody else agree with my notion that your nose is very important, because when you don't have any sense of smell, you can't taste the wine, you can't taste the food. All in all, it's a bit of a bore. So without more ado, we're going to get on with this tasting, because I don't want to keep you here all afternoon, all evening, or indeed tomorrow, and we've all got things to do with our lives. We're going to taste 3 wines together. I'm going to taste them, and you're going to watch me make a complete idiot of myself. So the first one I'm going to taste is, it's red. My wonderful assistant, Doris Bunkers, those of you who might have seen Wilbur's Gardening Weekly will know her. She's behind the camera, and she is an absolute genius behind the camera. I'm the genius who tastes wine and drinks it. So the first thing about tasting wine is, really? Surely if you make wine, you should be drinking it. And I tell you, I've been in the wine business over 40 years, and there are a lot of winemakers who think we're all really stupid because we go tasting wine and never drinking it. And I can see the point that they've got. But at the end of the day, if you're actually buying wine for other people, you need to assess it in a relatively dispassionate and objective way. And I must say, tasting wine blind, there is no better way to assess wine than tasting it blind. However, everything has its fault. And in an ideal world, I'd obviously like to both taste the wine, drink it, and spend time with it, rather like you would with a good book, or indeed a delicious meal. And wine is obviously, for the most part, meant to be drunk with food. But when we're coming to try and choose wines which we think our customers will enjoy, then tasting it in a relatively calm environment, which doesn't have any smells in it, is very, very important. So we tend to taste wine with the wine producer when we're visiting in the vineyards in France, Spain, Italy, Australia, wherever. And then we bring the bottles, the sample bottles, back to the UK into a very, very harsh laboratory environment, and we will taste wines in groups of 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever. Now, you might think that's pretty harsh, but actually at the end of the day, if a wine is really up to it, and if the person who's tasting it, more importantly, is really up to it, then normally you'll get the right answer. And in an ideal world, I probably would taste with 2 other trusted people who I think have either got equal or better palates than I've got. So as you can imagine, it takes quite a lot to find the right people. And then we would make our minds up, but many more than 2 or 3, and frankly, you're having a committee of people tasting, and I'm not a great fan of committees. I am a great fan of you, the listener, the viewer, getting to understand what I like, what I don't like, measuring your own palate against mine, and if you find that what I like appeals to you, well done. And if you find that what I like is what you absolutely loathe, I'm very, very sorry. My job is to be really consistent on everything I do. Here we go. So wine number one. Well, the good news is, and I tell you, it's taken a lot of skill this, I can tell you it's red. I know, remarkable, isn't it? So here's a red wine. First thing to do when you're tasting wine, I get these other two glasses out of the way, is check to see whether the wine, the colour of the wine, how it looks in the glass, is it clear, is it light, is it quite full, is it purple red, is it brick red, is it brown red? So from purple through to brown is an indication of its age, clarity, and the actual intensity of the colour is an indication normally of the body of the wine. And in the case of this wine, I would say it's pretty full coloured. It's got lots of nice purple colour in it, and also got a lot of deep red colours in it. So from just looking at the colour of the wine, and ideally, Doris, you wouldn't be sweet and just get me a white background, would you? Doesn't really matter what it is. Ideally, when you're in a situation where you're actually checking wine in a laboratory environment, just have to be an envelope. That's fine, thank you very much. It's great to have a white background, just to show you how prepared I have been for this great event. I didn't even have a white background with me. If you hold the wine against a white background, I don't know, you can't really see that so easily, but what it does do is it sets off the colour much better. So from this I can tell that it has got a really lovely, starts off purple in the middle and then fades to a nice medium red colour at the end. I would suggest this wine, just from looking at it, would not be a wine that's younger than probably 3 to 5 years old, I would say, just from looking at it. Okay, next thing we're going to do, as I've been banging on about it, is smelling the wine. That smells very, very nice. The first thing I smell, there are two things I smell. First is fruit, and the second is things other than fruit. I smell a bit of alcohol. Now that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think what that tells me is that this wine is produced in a slightly warmer area than, say, France, the northern part of France, Champagne area, Alsace, and even as far south as Burgundy and possibly Bordeaux. It smells because of the alcohol that it probably doesn't come from those areas. It would come from either further south in France, or it would come from somewhere else, I suspect in Europe, because the initial aromas, and remember, I don't know what these wines are, but the initial aromas would indicate that the wine comes from quite a nice possible blend of noble varieties with distinctive bouquets and flavours. Okay, so that's the first thing. The other thing I smell on this wine, and that gives it a slight, and again quite a bit of warmth, is I smell a hint of vanilla and toast. Vanilla and toast are an indication that the wine has been matured in oak barrels. So, two things it says to me. One, we're not dealing with a particularly inexpensive bottle of wine. It's probably costing a bit of money, because if you're starting to use expensive oak and the wine's got a bit of maturity about it, I suspect it costs a bit more than your Vino Ordinario. I think it's, we're talking about more than probably 15 quid here. Anyway, I like the smell. Now, there are two things I smell in this wine. One is cherries, plums, a little bit of spice, and then there's a lovely, spicy, almost clove, nutmeggy centre. Now, what that suggests to me straight away is this wine comes from more than one grape variety. I would hazard a guess that it probably comes from 2 or 3. Now, I've said to you earlier that I don't think this wine, when you're blind tasting, folks, either you get the wine straight away, you say, I think this is. And that would tend to be a wine you might have tasted before, or else it's just got a very distinctive signature. It could be from the Riesling grape, which just, when you smell the Riesling grape, it can't be anything else. It could be, it smells of Pipi de Char. I'm trying to keep this clean because I know that, it might be people who are meant to be in bed by now watching this. So it might be cat's pee, it might, which would indicate the Sauvignon Blanc grape, etc., etc. For me, I am not 100% sure where this comes from, or indeed what it's made of, but I'm pretty sure it's at least 2 varieties, possibly 3. So, one more smell. Nice. Here we go. Taste. I like that. So, I like it because it tastes delicious. And do you know something, folks? Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. If you try a wine and you slurp it and you put it around your mouth, and the reason, by the way, I make those funny noises is I'm trying to bring air into my mouth, because that way you actually create a much better flavour identity profile for the wine, because you're bringing oxygen in and that opens up a lot of the flavour profile. For me, that wine has got 3 distinct edges to it. It's got a lovely fruitiness, it's got a little bit of vanilla, allied to quite a lot of tannin. Tannin comes from the skins of the grape, and that indicates, again, the wine's been aged for quite a while, but it also means that the grapes themselves, some of the grapes would have had some tannin in them. And then the third thing is there's quite a rich, almost plump flavour. Plump, rich, slightly fat, used in the nicest possible connotation. And we're all now starting to build up a picture of what this wine might be. So we know, what do we know? We know it's quite tannic, we know it's quite alcoholic, we know there's some vanilla, tasty vanilla, which indicates aged in oak. We know it probably comes from a blend of 3 different grape varieties, and here we go. Let's start thinking about what this might be. The first thing, you can't identify what the wine is unless you've had it before, but what you can do is you can rule out what it's not. Well, the first thing to say is that wine does not come from Bordeaux. It's too hot, it's too alcoholic, and also it's a little bit dry. The grapes are too ripe. So I would suggest it comes from a warmer area. But I mentioned the word Bordeaux because I think at least 1 or even 2 of the grapes are Bordeaux varieties. I think there is some Cabernet Sauvignon in that, and you get Cabernet as the most widely planted red variety of noble lineage that's planted in the wine world. I think there's some Cabernet Sauvignon in that. But I said to you earlier that the wine tasted quite plummy. And I think that plumminess comes from another grape grown widely in Bordeaux, mostly on the right bank, which is where Saint-Émilion Pomerol are located. And that grape is called the Merlot grape. The thing about the Merlot grape, when used together with the Cabernet grape, is it tends to have the ability to soften the flavours of the Cabernet Sauvignon. So they're often used in conjunction one with the other. But I actually also think there is another variety hanging around the background there, because I don't think it's just Cabernet, I don't think it's just Merlot, I think it's a combination of 2, but the third variety I think it possibly could be is something like Tempranillo, which is an important variety grown in Rioja in Spain, or, and I'm slightly, I don't know, I can't quite get there. I think there is some strawberry quality about this. I think there could be a grape variety grown in Italy, which is called Sangiovese. So if I think this is a Cabernet Merlot Sangiovese blend, then I'm definitely going to be heading in one direction only. In the 60s, early 60s, the Italian wine regime was all over the place. It's not as if it's got that much better over the years, but just in case, many of my friends are Italian and I collect a lot of Italian wine. But in the 60s, a lot of the really good producers were getting fed up with the fact that the Italian authorities really were not giving enough thought to actually having some form of appellation. And so what they decided, and they call these denominazioni, so what they decided to do was, in Tuscany, is form a breakaway group to make wines, whatever wines they wanted to make. And the most famous of those was in a place called Bolgheri, and the wine was called Sassicaia, and Sassicaia is made from pretty much 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. And after Sassicaia was produced, the people who were making Chianti also thought, that's a good idea. So they started planting Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, but they kept their Sangiovese. They made blends of these wines, but they weren't allowed to actually, there was no denominazione to cover off these wines. So they fast became a category of their own called Super Tuscan. So what I'm saying to you, put you out of your misery, is I think that this wine, put myself out of my misery because I haven't got a clue what this is, I think this wine comes from Sangiovese, Cabernet and Merlot, probably equal quantities, and I think it comes under the category of Super Tuscans. I think it comes from Tuscany. Haven't got a clue where that might be. And as I said to you earlier, I think it's no less than 3 years old, probably no more than 5 years old. So I would say 2015, 2016 probably. Super Tuscan. Price, I'd say somewhere between 15 and 25 pounds. Pay more than 25, don't think you're getting a good deal. Pay 15, you're getting an exceptional deal. And my marks out of 10, I'd give that 7.5. I think it's a really nice wine, and I'm looking forward to having that later on today with a little bit of ossobuco maybe. Or even, I'll tell you what would be absolutely delicious, and that would be a beautiful shoulder of lamb, studded with some garlic and some anchovy and some rosemary, and then cooked over some amazing potatoes, sliced up with a little bit of wine, poured over it, stuck in the oven for about 1.5 hours, and then you have this with it. Marriage made in heaven. Anyway, enough of all that. Let's move on to wine number 2. So far, so good. I liked it. And Wilbur's yum factor for that would be 2 stars. So, the next wine, which Doris has kindly just opened for me, and is pouring, I'll tell you the colour, another red wine. Now, immediately she's poured that, thank you so much, Doris, I can tell you straight away that this wine is lighter in colour than the previous wine. Could you... I tell you what we haven't done. We haven't done the big reveal, have we? So let's reveal what that first wine was, because I don't know what it was. Here it comes out of its capot. And where are my glasses? I haven't got a clue, Vicar. Borrowing Doris's. Thank you very much. So this wine is called Commendatore Enrico Lornano, and the Migliore Vino Assoluto gave it 99 points, which is jolly exciting for the people who judge this wine. But it is a Toscana Rosso 2015, so it's highly likely that this is one of those Super Tuscans I was talking to you about. And well done, Commendatore Enrico. I thought that was an absolutely delicious wine, 2015. So I've got the age pretty much spot on. And we'll stick that over there. In fact, what we're going to do is pour a bit more in the glass, because I want to say and show you straight away the difference in colour between these two wines. Here is the Commendatore Enrico. See? Quite a lovely deep colour. Here is wine number 2. And you can just see, I hope you can see, that way, no you can't. I'm afraid you'll have to trust me. This wine has a slightly more tawny red-brown colour, but it's also much lighter in colour, okay? The first thing I'm going to tell you is, it is absolutely not a hope in hell that wine, number 2, comes from something like the Cabernet grape or anything associated with it. I think it looks to me as though it's going to be a more delicate wine altogether. You may have guessed, by the way, folks, that a lot of trying to find out what a wine is and what it tastes like, what it is taking a look at it before you even taste it. Take a look at the colour and then also assess the smell. So we've just said lightish, medium red colour, which goes a little bit limpid at the edges. Suggest the wine again is a wine which is certainly more than a year, 2 years old, but more than that I can't tell you. Now, do you remember what I said earlier? I said in certain situations you go bingo, okay? You go bingo because you know what the grape is, or the grapes are. In this case, I know what this grape is because it smells of the following. First thing, it smells absolutely wonderful. Absolutely tip-top. It happens to be an area of which I know just a little bit about because I collect wines from this grape variety. It's got a sort of a strawberry colour, and as it happens, when you smell this, it also smells of very nice, ripe, burnished strawberries that have had just a hint of brown sugar added to them, and you whip them in maybe with a tiny bit of butter and just give them a quick shift around the saucepan and then take it off the pan. And you get this lovely, almost wild strawberry, slightly cooked, not too much, just right, sautéed strawberry flavour and nose and bouquet. So that's, again. And once you've got that, you can immediately say that that wine is made from the Pinot Noir grape, 100%. If I'm wrong, I promise you I am going to strip in front of the cameras, okay? So you heard it here first, Wilbur's first strip on his regular monthly blind tasting with port to port, and probably his last regular monthly blind tasting, because it won't be a very pretty sight. But I'm very confident about this. One of the ways in which you actually improve your skills of eating and drinking is having the confidence to actually say, I think that this is Pinot Noir, or I think that this isn't Pinot Noir, okay? It doesn't matter what it is, but also important not to have noises off, because they put me off. But I'm loving smelling this wine, and what's very important, by the way, is you can't really smell wine and taste it and then immediately say this is. You've got to spend a bit of time appreciating it, because one of the things I've tried to tell anybody who bothers to listen is that it's so much better just to spend double the amount of money on a bottle of wine and drink maybe half the amount less, because otherwise I think you are missing out on very important things in life. It's not to say I want you all spending 25 quid every time you go out to buy a bottle of wine, but also you shouldn't carp if you spend, a tenner on a bottle, because if you consider that over nearly £5 a bottle is in either duty, tax, VAT, the cost of the bottle or packaging, it doesn't leave a lot of juice if you're only spending, let's say, £6 a bottle. £1.50 of juice isn't going to buy you a lot of wine. So this gorgeous, nice, deep, but not overly so red, brick red wine, which has got a super smell of intense wild strawberries with a hint of vanilla, is something which I have to say I'm looking forward to tasting. Now, immediately I smell this wine, I get an intensity and also a character which would lead me away from Burgundy. Burgundy is the centre of Pinot Noir. And when I say it's the centre, it's because Burgundy was the first place where you could actually find Pinot Noir. Back 900 years ago, or whatever it was, they were growing Pinot Noir then. And maybe not quite 900 years ago, but certainly 700 years ago they were. And the other thing to say is that from Burgundy, clones of Pinot Noir were then transported elsewhere in the world. And one of the first places they were taken to was California, and then other parts of the New World followed shortly thereafter, certainly off to South America, off to Australia, off to New Zealand and South Africa. And those are the places where Pinot Noir is most successfully grown. Obviously it's also grown in places like Hungary, in Eastern Europe, but we're talking about a pretty serious wine here, and I would suspect that this is a serious Pinot Noir. And again, it just smells a little bit too rich and ripe to have come from Burgundy, Alsace or the Loire, where Pinot Noir is grown in France. So I suspect this wine comes from the New World. Now, how the hell are you going to identify what part of the New World this comes from? The answer is with a great deal of difficulty, but I'm going to taste it. Well, my friends at Port have thrown up a bit of a googly here because, of course, this wine is chilled and just needs to be warmed up. So while we're doing this, interesting though, really interesting. I wondered why, and it could be I'm actually going to have to get rid of my producer, young Doris here. Luckily, she has chilled this red wine and not the previous one. Not a problem though. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to leave it. We'll come back to it later because it does need to warm up. But I think Doris has done us all a favour. While we're talking about chilled wine, let's just give you a couple of facts here. If you are intent on drinking ice cold wine, I'm not going to stop you. But that is the only time when I would suggest you don't go and waste much more than about £5 on a bottle of wine because you won't taste it. If it's really, really cold, you might as well actually go and buy a bottle of vodka for all the good it'll do you. You won't taste the wine because what makes liquids smell are the molecules which are less stable in liquid form, and they evaporate, and that is what wafts up to your nose and how you can start identifying what the wine is. If the wine is cold, what it does is it makes the whole smelling process much more difficult. I did find that whilst I said this is clearly Pinot Noir straight away, I couldn't actually identify some of the other smells which I think are probably quite important in this wine. And then when I went and tasted it, which is when I first, because I hold the wine by a stem. Now this glass, whilst it's is not an ISO, an International Standards Organization tasting glass, is shaped quite like it. But it just happens it's got a bigger bowl because I want to put quite a bit more wine in it, so I can taste it in it. So by shaking it around, you release some of the wonderful aromas, and already I'm beginning just to appreciate how excellent this wine is. I still don't think it comes from Burgundy, by the way. This absolutely wonderful, I hope, Pinot Noir, and we're about to get a big reveal. Please, please, please tell me it is. It's Sanso. So there we go. Okay, everybody. Here come the trousers. No, I'm not going to do that. I could have sworn this was Pinot Noir, but what's very interesting is that it's Blackwater 2017 Sanso. And I am going to, it's imported by Humble Grape, and but it's actually available, I know, from port to port. And all I can say is that if this is Sanso, which it probably is, I'm a Chinaman. Well, I love being wrong, because I've never tasted this wine before. I think it's still outstanding. If this is red and it's cold, I'll get very worried. It is red and it's cold. Perfect. This is going well. No, this isn't cold. Thank you, Doc. Whoa. Could you... Whoa, whoa, whoa. Wow. Okay, so I reckon I've had two wines which are absolutely right on the nail. Although I haven't worked out where that wine comes from, I know it's Pinot Noir. This third wine, this has really dealt me a bit of a curveball, I think is the word for it. It's an American expression, and it's when you're in baseball and you throw a ball which actually goes zzz, and goes round the outside of the bat of the batter, and you still get a strike. So great turn, because a curveball is something that you're not expecting. And I sure am not expecting anything here. It has got an amazing aroma which I cannot put my finger on. The colour in it, by the way, it's the lightest of the three wines that we have seen. It's lightish red, very attractive, nice and clear, no fish or anything else swimming in it, so that's good. And I'm shaking it around because there's quite a pong on this wine, and I just want to make sure that if there are any off flavours or off scents on the wine, that we drive them away by agitating the wine like that. And guess what? Because I've shaken it around and introduced quite a bit of oxygen into the wine, so some of the aromas, which I quite honestly haven't been that fond of, have dissipated. And that would tend to be sulfides. And because sulfur and sulfur dioxide are naturally occurring in wines, sometimes they dissolve themselves in the liquid after a while, and they can actually express themselves as hydrogen sulfide, particularly if the gases have been in the wine over a certain period of time and dissolved in it. So why I shake it is to introduce oxygen into the wine, and that way we actually get rid of some of those sulfides. And that's what we've done. That's now smelling better. I still think there is a bit of sulfide on the wine, but let's not worry about that. Mm. 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 Wow. Woo. Woo. Whoa. Yeah, hello. Still here. So, wow. That's one hell of a mouthful. Whew. I'm speechless, folks. I tell you what I'm going to keep doing, and that is holding this other glass in my hand to give it a bit more warmth. While I recover from the first taste of that wine. So this is a real shock to me. I am absolutely flabbergasted by the flavours of that wine, which is great, because I've tasted a lot of wine in my life, but this is something I've never come across. Well, the good news for you folks is that Wilbur is going to be making an idiot of himself in a minute, because I'm not sure I know what that is, but I'm going to have an educated guess as to what we've got. So now you see, after about 5 minutes, all those dodgy smells have disappeared. And taking another look at the colour, I'd say that colour is quite mature. So, I mean, it's crimson rather than red, with slightly browny hints on the rim. That indicates, again, the wine is probably 3 to 4 years old. comes from a pretty warm region, because one of the first things I get when I tasted that wine was alcohol. But as to where that is from, when I was really doing a huge amount of tasting, when I was doing my Master of Wine examination back in 85, 86, we were doing a lot of blind tasting, and we were given some wines which clearly we wouldn't know. And what you need to do in situations like that is you need to rule out what the wine isn't, as I said earlier, but you also need to, without being rude, try and identify countries which you might not be so familiar with, which this wine might have come from. So my initial thought on wine number 3 was that flavour-wise, it is extremely alcoholic. And when I say extremely, I'm saying that wine is probably 14 degrees alcohol or more. But it does have some very nice acidity, otherwise you'd be blown away. And in terms of its flavour, the flavours are all over the place. You've got strawberries, you've got spice, you've got dried figs, you've got a bit of licorice, you've got star anise, and you've almost got sort of other red fruits, some currants perhaps. So you've got a very nice bit of acidity on top of the wine, keeping it fresh. Then underneath, you've got all these fruits hanging around, covered by a generous amount of alcohol. Doris, I couldn't trouble you for a bit more of the wine number 3, please. So, what does that mean? If it was, that's lovely, thank you so much. If this was a wine coming from a classic area of production, then I would definitely point my finger at a blend dominated by one red variety called Grenache, Grenache. And Grenache makes wines, wild wines like this. And it's grown a lot in Spain where it's called Garnacha. But it is true to say that there are a load of more countries producing wine nowadays, and it is possible that this wine comes from way further east. I'd say it definitely comes from Europe, actually. I don't think it comes from anywhere else, because just the blend of funky grape varieties here would make me think that it's probably a European wine. But it could come from somewhere in Central Eastern Europe. I mean, it could come from Hungary, it could come from Croatia, it could come from Macedonia. But I think it's more probable that this wine actually comes from the south of France, most specifically from the Rhone Valley, where the Grenache grape is grown. And down in the south of the Rhone, it is normal to have wines made from blends of up to 13 different varieties, some of which are even white. And that particularly comes from a place called Châteauneuf-du-Pape. I don't think this is a Châteauneuf-du-Pape. What's worrying me is there is almost a tube of slightly burnished, almost toffee-like flavour that actually goes through the middle of this wine. So that could be because some of the grapes from this wine were picked when they were overripe. It could be because of the way that this wine is made, or it just could be that the grapes that are that colour, etc., should never have appeared in this wine in the first place. Do I like this wine? If I'm being absolutely honest with you, probably not. Do I think there are people out there who would like this wine? I'm absolutely certain of it, because it is quite a big, punchy, flavourful wine. It would go extremely well with something like curried rattlesnake, probably, or indeed ceviche of goat. But there isn't a lot that I would probably want to eat with it. But having said all that, I'm not here to say, oh, this is nice, because I'm afraid to say that that's not what I'm about. I like the way this wine has been put together, but I'm not absolutely convinced that it's a wine. I hope that my picture hasn't given up on you. I think it's a wine which will appeal to a lot of other people, just not to me. So I think this wine is a blend of Grenache with one or two other southern Rhone varieties. What those varieties are, I know not. Possibly Cinsault, possibly one or two other weird and wonderful varieties. In terms of its price, I would say I definitely would not pay more than £15 for this bottle of wine. And I suspect that it's a wine with, as I said, about 2 to 5 years bottle age, so probably 2017, something like that. I guess it would be on the shops for around 12.50, 15 quid, maybe. Lovely. I'm going to put it aside, maybe come back to it later. I'm now very hurriedly going to return to wine number 2. Hello, wine number 2. How are you? Oh, I think you've warmed up just right now. Oh, yes. Now, because this wine is a little bit warmer, but chilled nonetheless, I think we're going to have a lot of fun. The first thing that's going to happen is we're going to actually be able to smell it and get a lot more of the fruit, which I couldn't get earlier. So there is a lot of lovely, ripe, but not overripe, strawberry fruit on this wine. Hooray! And actually, looking again at the colour, I would say that this wine cannot be more than 2 to 3 years old max. That's a wine with amazing structure, great flavour, and that's Pinot Noir, which definitely does not come from Burgundy, because there is a sweetness there which you just don't get in Burgundy. But having said all that, it's a wine out of the top drawer, because it's, as I said, it's got this beautiful strawberry, almost fraise de bois, strawberry flavour, surrounded by lovely toasty vanilla hints, not too much, just delicate, just balanced, lovely acidity. And I think that places this wine in 1 or 2 countries who really know what they're talking about. Don't think there is yet a South American Pinot Noir that tastes this good. I don't think this wine comes from Australia. It's a possibility it might come from New Zealand, from Central Otago, but I'll be honest with you and say there are hints of this wine, almost the hints where I would call them the spice and the slight, what I call fynbos. And those of you who've been to South Africa will know what fynbos are. Wild grasses which have got herbs and stuff in them. And I associate those wild grasses and herbs with the style of this wine. I think this is Pinot Noir from a top producer somewhere in Hermanus or Henard Valley, to be more specific. As I say, 2 years old, very good. And this you will probably be paying up to 30-35 quid a bottle for. I think it's that good. So there we go. South African, top quality Pinot Noir. Thank you very much. And that's 3 stars on the Wilbur scale, and certainly a good 9 out of 10. Wine number 3. Let's do wine number 3 first. Put me on my misery, because I really don't feel very comfortable about this. And this is one of the reasons why we're doing blind tasting today, folks. It's because I haven't got a clue what we're tasting. And here we go. In fact, oh, there! Okay, well, I've been undone. I did well in terms of working out quite a lot about it. This is actually, this is quite a famous wine called Girolamo Russo, and it's from Etna. But I suspect that the grapes for it are Nerello Cappuccio, Nerello Mascalese, and I don't know if we're going to be able to find that out on this. Certainly contains sulfites. I said to you that I thought there was a bit of H2S on the wine, and there was. But this producer is very famous and very successful. And I'm afraid to say that although he's very famous and very successful, it's a style of wine which I think is almost like work in progress. So I think there are a lot of people who will like this. It's just a bit too powerful for me. It's 14.5% alcohol, and that's a lot of alcohol for this style of wine, in my opinion. Funnily enough, if we'd drunk that wine chilled, it might have been a little bit better, because it would have just held its structure together. But I will say that this probably is about as close to a natural wine as we will have tasted today. I suspect that although it does contain sulfites, I suspect this has been made as naturally as possible, which means that the winemaker has certainly kept the amount of, well, it's not the winemaker, it starts off in the vineyard, very, very little chemicals used in the vineyard, if any at all, and very few chemicals used in the winemaking process. So there we've got it, Girolamo Russo from Etna, and Etna wines are spectacular. And on Mount Etna now, from the volcanic soils, you can get wonderful Pinot Noir, you can get these fantastic single variety wines, and you also can get these amazing fun wines, such as the Girolamo Russo. So for those of you whose favourite wine this is, sorry, but on Wilbur's scale, this just gets 1 star. So, all three, fascinating to taste, and this is called Zeitgeist Sasso. I know nothing about it, because if I did, it would indicate I've seen what the wines are and done some research. I'm now going to try and hide from you so you don't kill me, because I've only really got the first wine right. I thought the third wine was probably Côte du Rhône, but I didn't know that it was pretty alcoholic, whereas the Blackwater Sasso is only 13.5 degrees of alcohol, and that actually means that one thing I did get right, and that is the wine is amazingly elegant. It's got beautiful fruit, it's got a nice toasty quality about it, and Blackwater, I tell you, is a producer to watch coming out of South Africa. So, we're there. We've done all three wines. I've had a lot of fun. I've completely made errors on 2 of the wines, but I hope you've learned a little bit about the fact that if you let yourself go and don't really care, you actually learn a lot more about the flavour of wine. Next time I see you, we'll have 3 more wines, and hopefully I'll write something to go with the tasting. But until I see you again, here's to happy drinking and a lovely rest of the day and the next few weeks.